Hi guys! So, we're going to talk about making a still life using materials that we have around ourselves. It can be anything you can find close to you, small that you can put on your table. So I'll pick a few things here. Got a marker, a pen, some little paper clips, and a pair of scissors. So now we're going to arrange our still life, and it can be, however you want it, whatever looks interesting to you. Oh, maybe like that. It's going to need to kind of stay still though. So think about that when you're arranging it. If it's something that could easily fall, you're going to have to put it back, and that might be kind of tricky. Okay. I am not going to worry about erasing. You shouldn't either. This is going to be a shaded drawing, and so if we get a little mess happening and things don't turn out right, we're just going to draw on top of our mess and see what happens. Sometimes people are too focused on things being perfect to find out if they might be able to be even better than you expected with the little mistakes in there. Okay. So, thinking about the shape of each of these objects, we're going to look at their basic shapes. So, I've got a marker here. So, its basic shape is a long cylinder. So, two straight sides and oval at the end and curved. Same general idea for the pen. The paper clips are lines, but they're a little tricky because they are going to have some highlights, some shading, so some parts we're not going to color in. So we can't just draw the line for them, so it's a little trickier. And then we've got scissors. Two loops there, and then straight lines here. Okay, so I'm going to very, very softly just let my pencil barely touch the page and kind of rough in where I see each of these items. So this marker, let's make a straight line for the bottom of it. So I've looked at it and I've matched the angle. That's very important when you're trying to make a still life. Think about the angle. So angle is like how tall or short the line is going, right? And so look at the angle and make sure it matches on your paper the best you can. It's okay if it doesn't, because you're learning, right? You're practicing, but it's going to look more realistic, and we're going for realism today, if the angle matches. Let's slide these up a little bit so we can move my paper if we need to before I get too far into it. There we go. Okay. So now that I've got that straight line, and you can see I just barely drew it, and I even kind of scribbled it in. I call this sketch line because it's not just one solid line. I didn't push hard and just make one line. I just very lightly kind of dotted in where I thought that line was going to be. Okay, so then I'm going to do it for the top. So think about how far it needs to be, and then make another straight line very gently. Okay, so those should kind of match as best you can. Okay, and then the end is a oval right there, so we're going to put a very flat oval. Now you might not have the same objects as me, as you're not doing a marker. You need to look at the basic shapes. You can close one eye and trace it with your pencil or your finger and think, what shape is that? Not what shape do I think it should be. What shape is it? Okay, so then we've got this little curve here. Okay, so now I've got the body shape of my marker, and it's just a cylinder, pretty much. Okay, now when I look at the lid, the line of the lid is not perfectly in line with the body. It kind of has an angle that goes out some. Flares out, kind of like a trumpet. So we're going to very gently put in the lid line. And you can kind of measure it, you know, with your thumb or your fingernail. One thumbnail, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe about 5, 4.5 for the body. So it should be 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Okay, and then we're going to finish that off with the curve for the top there. It's got a little inside curve. So we're going to make that too. Alright, so there's the basic shape of the pin that I have right there. My camera a little bit. There you go. Okay. Now, it's not done at all because the basic shape does not give me all the details. It has a logo on it for one thing. So we're going to look at what shape that's making. It's kind of making rectangles, but notice that they are curving with the sides of the pin, and they're in the same angle as the pin. Okay, so curve any logos around round objects, like if you have a water bottle or something like that, the logo is going to curve around it. That's really going to help it look 3D. If you just drew a flat rectangle, it wouldn't look right. Okay, and then that's a straight line as far as I can tell, connecting them. Okay, and the same for the logo that wraps around from the other side. And if your lines aren't perfectly straight, that's why we sketch them, because you can always come back and make them darker. But since we're not worried about erasing, it's going to be hard to take some away. Of course, you can erase, especially if you want to go back and add highlights. But I just don't want you to be worried about it. Okay. So then you're going to rough in any details. Just copy the shapes you see. Like I can see parts of the letters here. I'm not going to take a long time to mess with it. I'm just going to kind of vaguely put in that shape that I see. Remember, don't draw what you think should be there. Don't make like the actual whole logo if it's not showing. Just draw the part that you can actually see. There, and it actually has some words here for me to copy. Don't know what they'll mean, but we're being realistic, so I'm copying them. Okay, now then for this pin it is black and white. So this is where my shading's going to come in. I'm going to shade in the parts that need to be black, darker, and the parts that need to be white. Now watch out, this stuff does smear. It smears quite a lot. So try not to rub your hand over it or the whole picture is going to smear and the color is going to spread out. That part of the label. Okay, now the lid. The lid is also black, but you notice that because it is shiny plastic, there is a white stripe of a glare from the lights. Okay, so you're not going to color the whole thing black. Don't just scribble it all in. Think about where that glare is going to be and color around it. You also don't need to like outline the glare. You just need to not color it in. Sometimes I have kids who outline their highlights, so then instead of the highlight being light, it has this dark outline on it. Just go around it and leave it blank. You can always make it smaller later. Start with it a little wide, and then you can squeeze it down to how skinny it looks in real life. Is there one on the top? Just a little tiny. Okay. Skinny as it is in the picture. Alright. Now, you might notice that there is a glare on the rest of the pin too. And even though it's white, that part is whiter. The other part is a little bit shaded. It does have some gray coloring because the light's not shining directly on it. So you are going to shade also anything that's not completely white. So I put some super light lines there. And what I can do is take just one finger. You could use like a one you're not going to use very much, maybe a pinky. And you can smudge a little bit. So this gives us a nice smooth shading that lets us blend our color. Okay, and put a little up here. Try not to use all your fingers for this. I don't need every single finger to be dirty. Pick just one or two that you use smudging with. Okay. So now we've left that highlight and the pin is a little bit shaded. The marker, I mean. Let's go to the pin. So my pin starts around there on my logo and it has this angle. Like this. So around there. How big is it? It doesn't go very far on this side. Only around like that much. And when we get about that far, this is going to start being the lid. So put a little curve. Now the lid is a different shape. It's a little rounder. So go around. And then loop back in for the cap. Okay. Okay. This one has a logo in white. It's very small. I might not be able to actually make that show up. So what I think I'll do is I'll make sure to leave that section white. Just kind of have it white. And then go shade the rest of it. Because this is a purple pin, it looks darker. And you can always go back and reinforce your lines by making them a little darker. Okay, a little more shading on the cap. Notice there's a shadow in the curve of the lid clip. So make that a little darker. And then again, to smooth out your shading, you can use your finger. Okay. Now, paper clips. They're a little tricky because it's kind of a strange shape. They're hooked together and there's highlights on them. There's kind of a lot going on there. First, I'm going to super gently, again, everything when we sketch it out needs to be so soft so you don't have to go back and erase it. Super gently going to make the shape of each paper clip. So there's one. And then the other one's going this way. Okay, so now I'm looking at it. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. Okay, so I'm looking at them. There's a highlight there, and then opposite it's a little darker. So I'm going to make this side a little darker. But I'm not colored in that side yet. Okay, and then we get a little darkness here. Okay, you can just kind of leave that part not colored in. That sketch line is going to be plenty to show us where it's supposed to be. And the highlight is going to make it look brighter. So we don't even have to color these all the way in. Okay, and then on the inside, we've got a little bit, another highlight. And then this side's a little darker. And then looped around. Alright. Now the other paper clip, same thing. I'm going to look for the highlights and the dark spots. The highlights I'm not going to trace. The dark spots I'm going to trace. Till I get myself 2 paper clips. Okay. Last thing's going to be scissors. So the shape of the scissors are a little weird. I've even opened them, make it a little trickier. Right there. Okay. So all this is about is about looking at the shapes of the things you see around you, even normal everyday things. You might think, that's too hard, I can't draw that. But you can break everything down into these really basic shapes. And it might end up not looking right. And that's completely okay. Every time you practice this kind of stuff, you get better at seeing those shapes and lines. So the first few times you do it, it might just not work out. That's fine. And you'll see that mine is not perfectly correct either. It's never going to be. If we wanted everything to be perfectly correct, we could just take a picture. The fact that you drew it is the cool part. Okay. Curve there. Okay. Alright, so with that basic shape now I can put the inside shapes. And the shading. I'm just going to speed through the shading on this guy because it's pretty tricky and I don't want to waste a lot of y'all's time, so I'm going to speed through. If you want to like pause while I'm doing it and kind of look at what I did and what parts I was looking at, you can do that for sure. But we're getting the idea here, so I don't want to make you wait too long. And I mean, you could tell that all I'm doing is looking at the parts of the scissors that are darker and just coloring them in a little bit. Being able to tell what parts are darker and what parts are lighter is definitely a skill, and it's okay if it's kind of tricky for you at first. You know, you can be thinking about, where is the light bulb in this room? So where's the light coming from? I've got a light bulb right over there. So this light is hitting it, and I'm getting these shadows on the inside of the scissor handles because of the way the light's hitting. And it's got this pattern on it too. Just do that real quick. Okay, last thing we gotta do to really make this stuff stand out, besides darkening up any lines you need to, coloring in any parts that you need to, is going to be to make cast shadows. So when your objects are sitting on your table, there is going to be a shadow on the table made by your objects. You can see them. You can see it here in my picture, and you'll be able to see it in yours. Okay, so looking underneath your objects, you're going to carefully shade in. You can even use your finger that's already got some color on it to do this, where the shadows are on the table. Look at the shapes the shadow make. Like this one's like a triangle. Don't just guess willy-nilly, really look at them. Anytime you're making realistic art, just doing what you think is there is never going to be as good as actually looking and believing your eyes. And I know it's tricky because if you move or the objects move even a little bit, it can change how it looks. And so you might end up that your picture doesn't look quite right. That's okay. We're not perfect, and our eyes can see things differently depending on the angle. Like if you move your head to the side, guess what? Your whole picture is going to look a little different. And that's okay. That's what we're learning about. Okay. Paper clips, I even have a little shadow. It's very small though. And my scissor shadow. Really going to darken up that line between the scissors and the shadow so it doesn't all look like one thing. Okay, there is my still life of normal things you can find in your classroom or bedroom or wherever. And that's what we're going to try to do. Realistic shading. Okay guys, bye.